For as long as humans have existed, we have looked up at the sky with a quiet frustration and an unshakable desire. Long before cities, before nations, before written history, we watched birds rise effortlessly into the air and disappear beyond the horizon, while we remained bound to the ground. We crossed rivers, climbed mountains, sailed oceans, but the sky stayed out of reach. For thousands of years, flight was not just a technical problem. It was a symbol of freedom, distance, power, and possibility. And that dream refused to die. Every generation inherited it, carried it forward, and tried again, convinced that somehow, this time, humanity would finally leave the ground behind. You were probably taught that this dream became reality in 1903, when two brothers from Ohio flew an airplane at Kitty Hawk. And while that moment was undeniably historic, the truth is far more complex, far more human, and far more impressive than a single date or a single machine. The airplane was not born in one instant. It emerged from centuries of failure, obsession, insight, and relentless experimentation. And what truly changed the world was not just that humans flew, it was how they learned to control the sky. For most of human history, flight was imagined by copying nature. Early inventors believed that if humans could simply flap wings like birds, the problem would be solved. Designs were drawn, machines were built, and lives were lost. But birds were not machines, and the physics of flight refused to bend to wishful thinking. It wasn't until the Renaissance that something shifted. Thinkers like Leonardo da Vinci began to move beyond imitation and toward understanding. He sketched flying machines not as fantasies, but as systems. Later, scientists like Galileo and Newton laid the mathematical foundations that would finally explain motion, force, and resistance. These ideas didn't make humans fly, but they made flight understandable. By the late 18th and early 19th centuries, inventors began to focus on a critical idea. If humans were ever going to fly, the machine had to be heavier than air. Hot air balloons proved that floating was possible, but floating was not flying. Real flight meant lift, control, and sustained motion. George Cayley was one of the first to see this clearly. He designed gliders that separated lift, propulsion, and control into distinct systems, a concept so fundamental that modern aircraft still follow it today. When one of his gliders carried a human across the air in the mid-1800s, it wasn't a revolution, but it was a signal. Humanity was getting closer. As the 19th century progressed, inventors across Europe and America pushed forward, each solving part of the puzzle. Some achieved powered flight, but without control. Others mastered gliding, but without propulsion. Some machines flew briefly, others crashed spectacularly. Otto Lilienthal, the famous German glider pilot, made thousands of successful flights by shifting his body weight, proving that controlled flight was possible, but also showing how dangerous it was. When he died in a crash, the message was clear. Flight without precise control was a dead end. By the turn of the 20th century, all the pieces existed, scattered across different experiments and different minds. Lift had been demonstrated. Propulsion existed. Pilots had flown. Machines had left the ground. And yet no one had built an aircraft that combined everything into one reliable system. The dream was close enough to feel real, but still just out of reach. The final barrier wasn't power. It wasn't courage. It was control. This is where Orville and Wilbur Wright enter the story. Not as lone geniuses, but as master integrators. They didn't invent flight from nothing. They studied everything that came before them, learned from every failure, and focused relentlessly on the one problem no one had truly solved. How do you control a machine in 3 dimensions while suspended in air? Their insight came from observation. Birds didn't turn by flapping harder on one side. They twisted their wings. That subtle change created uneven lift, causing the bird to roll and change direction. The Wright brothers realized that flight wasn't about brute force. It was about balance. Their solution was revolutionary in its simplicity. By warping the wings of their aircraft, they could control roll. By adding an elevator to control pitch and a rudder to manage yaw, they created the first machine capable of full three-axis control. For the first time, a pilot could truly command an aircraft instead of merely surviving it. This wasn't just a technical breakthrough. It was the moment flight became practical. But control alone wasn't enough. To stay airborne, the aircraft needed sustained power, and early engines were heavy, inefficient, and unsuitable for flight. So the Wrights built their own. It wasn't powerful by modern standards, but it was light enough, efficient enough, and paired with something even more ingenious: propellers designed as rotating wings. They understood that propulsion followed the same physics as lift. Their hand-carved wooden propellers were so well designed that modern simulations still praise their efficiency. Every detail mattered, because in early flight, margins were razor thin. What truly set the Wright brothers apart, however, wasn't just what they built. It was how they built it. They tested relentlessly. When existing data didn't match their results, they didn't force reality to fit theory. They questioned the data. They built wind tunnels, tested hundreds of wing shapes, and generated their own measurements with extraordinary precision. They approached flight not as daredevils, but as engineers. Step by step, failure by failure, they refined their machine until it worked. And when it finally did on a cold December day in 1903, the flight itself was modest. It lasted seconds. It covered meters. But it changed everything. Because for the first time in history, a heavier-than-air, powered, piloted aircraft flew under full control and landed safely. Humanity had crossed an invisible boundary. From that moment on, progress accelerated. Nations recognized the strategic potential of the skies. During World War I, airplanes evolved from fragile reconnaissance tools into specialized machines of combat. Engines grew stronger. Designs grew faster and deadlier. And while airplanes didn't decide the war on their own, they proved beyond doubt that control of the air would shape the future. Between the wars, aviation became a symbol of daring and ambition. Pilots chased records, crossed oceans, and captured the imagination of the world. Figures like Amelia Earhart showed that flight wasn't just for militaries or engineers. It was for humanity. But it was World War II that pushed aviation into a new era. Aircraft became central to strategy, logistics, and power projection. Fighters battled for air superiority. Bombers reshaped cities and outcomes. And near the end of the war, a new technology emerged that would redefine flight itself: the jet engine. Jets shattered the limits of propeller-driven aircraft. They flew higher, faster, and farther than ever before. In the decades that followed, aviation transformed daily life. Commercial air travel shrank the world. Journeys that once took weeks now took hours. Cultures collided, economies intertwined, and the planet became more connected than at any point in history. The airplane didn't just move people, it moved ideas. Supersonic flight pushed boundaries even further, briefly allowing passengers to outrun sound itself. Military aircraft reached unimaginable speeds and altitudes. Helicopters added vertical flight, making access possible where runways never could. And today, aircraft are safer, more efficient, and more advanced than the Wright brothers could have ever imagined. Yet, the story isn't over. Unmanned drones are redefining logistics and warfare. New materials and propulsion systems promise cleaner, quieter flight. Supersonic travel may return. And once again, humanity looks upward, restless, unsatisfied, dreaming of what comes next. The airplane is more than an invention. It is the physical proof of a timeless human instinct, the refusal to accept limits. It reminds us that progress is rarely the result of a single moment or a single mind. It is built through persistence, collaboration, failure, and the courage to rethink what everyone else assumes is already solved. And while we often remember the names, the dates, and the machines, the true legacy of flight is far bigger. It is the reminder that even the oldest dreams can become reality, not through shortcuts, but through understanding. If this story changed the way you see flight, let me know in the comments. Which invention do you think people oversimplify the most? If you enjoyed this journey through one of humanity's greatest breakthroughs, make sure to like this video and subscribe for more stories that reveal how the world we live in was truly built.